Good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is March the 7th, the 66th day of the year. Only 299 days remain to this year's over with. It's just whipping by. Holidays and observances. It's National Cereal Day, National Sock Monkey Day, National Employee Appreciation Day, National Flapjack Day. It's also Alexander Graham Bell Day, Plant Power Day, Overseas NHS Workers Day. That's the UK's National Health Service. National Speech and Debate Education Day. National Be Heard Day, Friday Fish Fry Day, National Middle Name Pride Day, National Dress in Blue Day, National Crown Roast of Pork Day, National Tartar Sauce Day, Global Day of Unplugging, unplug from the electronic world after you listen to my show, National Invest in Veterans Week, National Ghostwriters Week, Ted Fest Week, Chocolate Chip Cookie Week, Termite Awareness Week, Celebrate Your Name Week, Moomba Festival, which is takes place in Melbourne every year. It's a multi-day event, draws thousands of locals and visitors to the banks of the Yarra River. National Dakota Winter Show, which is a 4-day event, March 5th through March 9th. Hearing Awareness Week, Make Mine Chocolate, National Green Week, Ramadan, the Muslim Holy Month, goes from February 27th to March 28th. Carnival Brazil takes place in Rio de Janeiro, goes from February 28th to March 8th. It's still going on, folks. You got time. Colchagua Wine Festival, which takes place in Chile. It's set in the picturesque Colchagua Valley. Brings together wine lovers and curious travelers who want to see folks get drunk and fall on the floor. Women in Aviation Week, Festival of Owls Week, Newspaper and Education Week, Words Matter Week, National Consumer Protection Week, Teen Tech Week. Before you think teens can't really be into tech, years ago, I had what was supposed to be the most sophisticated security system in the world on my computer. Federal government got it for me. We had a party, and I walk into my office, and there's a 9-year-old girl who had bypassed this sophisticated security and is playing games on the computer. I asked her how she did it, and she showed me in 5 easy steps how to beat the best security the government had at the time. I thought it was fascinating. The No More Week, Domestic Violence, don't you know? Women in Construction Week, School Breakfast Week, Return Borrowed Books Week, Read an eBook Week, National School Social Work Week, Dental Assistant Recognition Week, National Procrastination Week, Jewish Book Week, Endometriosis Awareness Week, National Professional Pet Sitters Week, Cheerleading Week, Will Eisner Week, Write a Letter Appreciation Week. Very few people write letters anymore. We do emails. Universal Human Beings Week, British Pie Week, Butcher's Week, Telecommuter Appreciation Week. It's famous people born on this date. Jenna Fisher, Rachel Weisz, she was gorgeous in The Mummy, Laura Prepon, and Bryan Cranston. March 7th is part of National Colon Cancer Awareness Month, National Athletic Training Month, Veggie Month, Developmental Disability Awareness Month, National Reading Month, National Women's History Month, Greek American Heritage Month, Red Cross Month, National Sauce Month, National Nutrition Month, National Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month, National Flower Month, National Noodle Month, National Brain Injury Awareness Month, National Celery Month, National March into Literacy Month, the Great Daffodil Appeal, International Mirth Month, Poison Prevention Awareness Month, National Crochet Month, Color Therapy Month, Workplace Eye Wellness Month, Adopt a Rescued Guinea Pig Month, Youth Art Month, Sing with Your Child Month, Read an eBook Month, National Ethics Awareness Month, Malignant Hypothermia Awareness and Training Month, Gender Equality Month, Exotic Winter Fruit and Leeks and Greens and Onions Month, Berries and Cherries Month, Academy Awards Month, National Play the Recorder Month, National Honor Awareness Month, Honor Society Awareness Month, don't you know? National Social Work Month, National Small Press Month, National Hemophilia Awareness Month, National Peanut Month, National Credit Education Month, National Caffeine Awareness Month, Frozen Food Month, National Umbrella Month, March for Water, Supply Management Month, Spiritual Wellness Month, Expanding Girls' Horizons in Science and Engineering Month, National Optimism Month, Middle Level Education Month, Gardening, Nature, and Ecology Books Month, Listening Awareness Month, Deep Vein Thrombosis Awareness Month, that's DVT, don't you know? Sensual Tremor Awareness Month, Mad for Plaid Month, Colic Awareness Month, Trisomy Awareness Month, National Bed Month, Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Month, International Ideas Month, National Breast Implant Awareness Month, Employee Spirit Month, Alport Syndrome Awareness Month, Save Your Vision Month, Epilepsy Awareness Month, International Brain Tumor Awareness Month, Endometriosis Awareness Month, National Kidney Month, National Craft Month, and National Music in Our Schools Month, and last but not least, Irish American History Month. And boy, do they have a history. Well, March 7th, in 161 A.D., Marcus Aurelius and L. Commodus, who changed his name to Lucius Verus, became joint emperors of Rome on the death of Antonius Pius. 1138, Conrad III von Hohenstaufen was elected king of Germany at Koblenz in the presence of the papal legate Theodwin. 1277, the University of Paris issues the last in a series of condemnations of various philosophical and theological theses. 1573, a peace treaty signed between the Ottoman Empire and the Republic of Venice, ending the Ottoman-Venetian War and leaving Cyprus in Ottoman hands. 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte captures Jaffa in Palestine, and his troops proceed to kill more than 2,000 Albanian captives. 1814, Emperor Napoleon I of France wins the Battle of Craonne. 1826, Shrewsbury abduction. 15-year-old Ellen Turner is abducted by Edward Gibbon Wakefield, a future figure in the establishment of colonies in South Australia and New Zealand. 1850, Senator Daniel Webster gives his 7th of March speech endorsing the Compromise of 1850 in order to prevent a possible civil war. 1876, Alexander Graham Bell is granted a patent for the invention he calls the telephone. 1902, Second Boer War. The Boers, led by Coos de la Rey, defeat the British at the Battle of Tweebash. 1921, the short-lived Socialist Lebanon Republic is proclaimed on this date. On this date, 1931, the Parliament House of Finland is officially inaugurated in Helsinki, Finland. 1941, Gunther Prien and the crew of German submarine U-47, one of the most successful U-boats in World War II, vanish without a trace. 1951, Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 307 crashes in Lyndhurst, Minneapolis, killed 15 people. 1951 also saw the Korean War Operation Ripper. United Nations troops by General Matthew Ridgway began an assault against Chinese forces. 1951 also saw the Iranian Prime Minister Ali Razmara being assassinated by Khalil Tamashebi, a member of the Islamic fundamentalist Fadayan-e-Islam, outside a mosque in Tehran. 1965, Bloody Sunday. group of 600 civil rights marchers are brutally attacked by state and local police in Selma, Alabama. Also on this date, 1965, Aeroflot Flight 542 crashes into Yermakovsky District, killed all 31 people on board. 1986, Challenger disaster. Divers from the USS Preserver locate the crew cabin of Challenger on the ocean floor. 1987, Layou Massacre. Taiwanese military massacre of 19 unarmed Vietnamese refugees in Donggang, Layou Kinmen. This day in 1989, Iran and the United Kingdom break diplomatic relations after a fight over Salman Rushdie and his controversial novel, The Satanic Verses. 1993, the tugboat Thomas Hebert sank off the coast of New Jersey. 2006, the terrorist organization Lashkar-e-Taiba coordinates a series of bombings in Varanasi, India. 2007, reform of the House of Lords. British House of Commons votes to make the upper chamber of the House of Lords 100% elected. No longer does your title handed down from your ancestors get you a seat. 2007, the Garuda Indonesia Flight 200 crashes at Adisutjipto International Airport in a special region of Yogyakarta, Indonesia. Killed 21 people. 2009, the Real Irish Republican Army kills 2 British soldiers and injures 2 other soldiers and 2 civilians in the Masserini Barracks, the first British military deaths in Northern Ireland since the end of the Troubles. 2021, at least 108 die and 615 are injured in the 2021 Bata explosions in Bata, Equatorial Guinea. 2024, Sweden officially joins NATO, becoming its 32nd member. 2024, Hannah Gutierrez Reed is found guilty of involuntary manslaughter in the death of Halyana Hutchins on the set of the movie Rust. First time someone's been found guilty for causing the death on a movie set. Well, that ends our history segment. I want to make everybody aware that you can now listen to this show on YouTube. In fact, a few minutes ago, I pulled up YouTube, and about halfway down the page, there was the show. You also find us on a lot of other platforms. We're getting ready to move into videos. They won't be long videos, but they'll get our message across. Okay, on this note, let's go see if we've got any news we want to cover. One of the government watchdogs fired by President Trump not only declined to sue him, but actually filed an amicus curiae brief supporting the administration's ability to fire from his position. Finally, somebody with some sense. And he said it was well within Trump's executive powers to fire him and 16 other U.S. inspectors general ousted just 4 days into his second term. His name was Eric Soskin, former inspector general for the U.S. Department of Transportation, appointed by Trump during his first presidential term. Now, as for inspector generals, I have filed numerous complaints with the inspector general of the VA and can't even get a response. The Colorado's district attorney is raising hell about Colorado's sanctuary policies. He said the Venezuelan gangs that are running rampant are far from being a fake problem. Democrats reportedly have rebuked party members who jeered Trump during the speech to Congress. Al Green was the leader of that bunch. And I'm not talking about the singer. MSNBC host Nicole Wallace I've seen her ratings plunge after Trump's election. And she also was called to task for her remarks about the 13-year-old cancer survivor, D.J. Daniel, who was given a honorary Secret Service credentials. Department of Homeland Security makes TSA change its policies to shorten airport security wait times. Bunch of female Democrats have done a video that has social media exploding. They're calling it a cringe TikTok video of AOC and a bunch of other House Democrats. They said it couldn't get any lamer. They pretend to be characters from video games, and they're talking about wanting to fight. Posted by social media influencer Jessica Wu, featured Democratic Representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Every picture I've ever seen of that woman, her mouth is wide open. Jasmine Crockett, Lauren Underwood, Catherine Clark, Judy Chu, and Susie Lee. I think they wanted to throw away their any chance of being reelected. Zelensky has confirmed that Ukraine will attend the America-led peace talks. This is after his run-in with Trump in the Oval Office. Supposedly in February, the economy added 151,000 jobs. That's where all the people that got fired from government can go. Now, let's see. Is there anything else of any interest? Ryan Routh, the would-be Trump assassin, is going to appear in a Florida federal courtroom. Even though the Democrats wished him well, it's not going to do any good. And Al Green, who had his meltdown and got ejected from the speech, the young boy who was being honored was actually one of his constituents. Flights are temporarily halted at several airports after SpaceX loses contact with one of its mega rockets. Well, got somebody, convict, is going to face a firing squad. Now I've got a list of folks from Congress who ought to be looked at for that particular role. All right. That took care of that. Now, if you're talking about Looney Tunes, let's talk about stupid criminals. I came across a list of some really crazy crimes and stupid criminals when I was going through my files. I've got files on everything you can imagine. We're talking about the dark side of human nature, the ugly side of society. But it also may be funny. For example, we got a parrot that was owned by a Colombian drug cartel. And in 2010, police raided a suspected cartel hideout in the city of Barranquilla, Colombia. And their suspicions were confirmed when Lorenzo, that's the parrot's name, recognized their uniforms and squawked, "Run, run, you're going to get caught." One police officer told reporters the parrot was sending out alerts. He was actually a watchbird. And just because Bird's testimony can't be admissible in a courtroom doesn't mean it can't influence the outcome of a case. See, police arrested 4 men in the raid and seized a large quantity of drugs. And they took Lorenzo and 2 other lookout birds into custody to see if they could be coaxed into revealing anything else about the gang. According to Officer Holman Oliveira, parents like to talk, and we're good listeners. Colombian police estimate that as many as 2,000 parrots have been trained to act as lookouts for drug cartels. Well, in another case, Hercule, a parrot owned by Vijay Neelam Sharma of India, was in the news. 2014, Neelam Sharma was murdered by robbers who burglarized her home. Police had very little to go on. They couldn't even identify a suspect. Well, Hercule, the parrot, was home at the time of the attack and apparently witnessed the crime. And he provided the first crew about a week after the murder. When Vijay's nephew, Ashutosh Goswami, visited the house, the bird became vigilantly agitated. During discussions, whenever Ashutosh's name was mentioned, the parrot would start screeching. And that raised everybody's suspicions, and the police were informed. And they brought Goswami in for questioning, and eventually he confessed to committing the murder. Police found the murder weapon and some of Neelam's jewelry in his possession. Now we got the case of Max, an African gray parrot owned by Santa Rosa, California resident Jane Gill in the early 1990s. Now, African gray parrots are some of the smartest birds I've ever come across. And you never know what they're capable of doing. In this particular case, Max apparently witnessed his owner being murdered in her own home. 2 days passed before Jane Gill's body was discovered. And when it was, Max was found in his cage nearby, hungry and dehydrated. Well, when he recovered his health, he'd start screeching, "Richard, no, no, no." Well, Gill's friend and former housemate was a man named Richard. And when other evidence pointed to Gill's business partner, Gary Rass, the police arrested and charged him. At his murder trial, Rass's attorneys tried to have the testimony of Max the parrot introduced as evidence, but the judge refused to allow it. When that trial ended in a mistrial in 1993, Rass was tried a second time, and in March of 1994, he was found guilty. Now, was Max correct? Or was the police correct? Well, let's talk about the swift hand of justice. January of 2004, an unknown man grabbed a bag out of a car, stopped at a stoplight in Sydney, Australia. The car belonged to Bradley McDonald, a local snake catcher. And in the bag was a snake he had just caught, a 4-foot-long, venomous, red-bellied black snake. When asked for his reaction for it being stolen out of his car, he said, "Well, it just might teach the thief a lesson." And it's well true, it might. Well, let's talk about what happened in July of 1996 when 37-year-old Willie King snatched a wallet from the coat of an old woman on the street in Greenwich Village, New York City. Well, the woman in question was 94-year-old Yolanda Gigante. You might ask who that was. Well, that was the mother of Vincent the Chin Gigante, the head of the Genovese crime family, one of the country's most powerful criminal organizations. Well, Willie King was called a short time later, and as soon as he realized who he'd mugged, he agreed to plead guilty to grand larceny. He got a sentence of 3 years in prison. King's lawyer, in a statement to the judge, said my client admitted his guilt at the earliest opportunity because he wants to put this incident behind him, and he hopes the Gigante family will do that as well, as opposed to having Willie King wind up at the bottom of the river wearing concrete overshoes. Well, carjacking is a terrifying crime. You're sitting in your car at a stoplight and suddenly a thug runs up to your window with a gun and demands you get out and give him the car. And there aren't a lot of ways to prevent such a thing. And it's actually a quick, sudden, ultimately speedy crime. But in South Africa, where carjacking is actually an epidemic, one inventor did figure out a way to punish carjackers before they got away with it. He used fire. A lot of fire. Charles Furry introduced the blaster to the South African car peripherals market in 1998. The price was 3,900 Rand, or about $655 back then in U.S. dollars. The first time of trouble, the driver would activate the blaster from the steering column, and it would squirt flammable liquid from a holding tank in the trunk out of two nozzles into the driver's side door. And then it would emit an electric spark that would ignite the gas. And, of course, it would ignite the hijacker as well. That did put a crimp in the carjacking business. Well, sometimes you can be too rich for your own good, especially if you're a kid. 1924, the body of a boy was found nude and drowned in a culvert in Wolf Lake, Indiana. He'd been hit in the head and then suffocated. Police identified the victim as Bobby Franks, the son of a Chicago millionaire. Nearby, the police found a pair of expensive glasses that they eventually traced to 19-year-old Nathan Leopold. Leopold had spent the day with Richard Loeb, a distant cousin of Bobby Franks. And under police questioning, both men broke down and confessed to killing Franks, and each one said it was the other one's fault. But there are those that think just because they have more money than anybody else that they're above the law. Well, these two suspects were graduate students at the University of Chicago. They were brilliant scholars who were pampered by their wealthy families. They came to believe they were superior beings, or what the philosopher Nietzsche calls supermen. And to prove that they were Superman, they decided they'd commit a perfect crime. So they picked up Franks in their car, hit him in the head with a chisel, and then suffocated him. After throwing his clothes in the brush and pouring acid on his corpse to delay identification, they notified the Franks family that their son had been kidnapped, and they asked for a $10,000 reward, or ransom, rather. But before the Supermen could get their money, Bobby's body was found, as were Leopold's glasses. At the trial, Leopold and Loeb were represented by famous American trial lawyer Clarence Darrow, and expected to argue the parents were innocent by reason of insanity. He stunned the country when he made them plead guilty to avoid a vengeful jury and give sentencing power to a thoughtful judge. Well, Darrow also brought in psychiatric experts who identified the situation and testified to the immaturity and emotionally diseased state of his teenage defendants. And Darrow reminded the court it was capable of mercy, unlike his deranged clients. Well, the verdict was life plus 99 years. Clarence Darrow's closing argument took 12 hours and still referred to in many anti-death penalty arguments. The men he'd saved became model prisoners, running a school to educate other prisoners. In 1936, Loeb was murdered by another inmate. In 1958, Leopold was paroled. He moved to Puerto Rico, where he worked at a hospital and dreamed of making a great medical breakthrough. So he'd be remembered as a hero instead of a killer. Unfortunately for him, that didn't work out so well. He died in 1971. Let's talk about the true story behind one of India's best-known unsolved mysteries. This is the case of the Stone Man. It spans 2 periods and 2 locations. The first was 1985 to 1988 in Bombay, India, and the second from June to December 1989 in Calcutta. And during this time period, 25 people were killed, 12 in the first 3-year span, and 13 more just over the 6 months in Calcutta. And the method by which the Stone Man took his victims' lives was certainly macabre and earned for him or her an odd nickname. In all the cases, someone crept up on the destitute person sleeping outside alone on a street or in an alley and dropped a large stone, weighing about 50 pounds, on the victim's head, which of course crushed the person's skull and killed the victim instantly. Indian police aren't convinced that the 2 series of murders were carried out by the same person. Instead, they said the Calcutta murder was probably carried out by a copycat killer. Well, since 1989, several similar cases have emerged, and authorities are unsure if this is the work of the same person or another copycat who is riding on the notoriety of the Stoneman murders. There's never even been a suspect in the case, so police just put the files in the filing cabinet and gone about their business. Well, sometimes it's clear that criminals are not the smartest folks around. There was a Boise man who stole a dog at gunpoint and tucked his gun in the waistline in the back of his pants and drove off with the dog. Well, the gun began to bother him while he was driving, so he reached back to reposition it and shot himself in the butt. And then when he tried to remove the gun from his pants, he shot himself in the butt again. Well, as you might guess, he had to be hospitalized. Getting shot in the butt's a fairly serious condition, and the dog was returned to his home. He wound up having to face charges. Then we have a man who committed crimes in Morgantown, West Virginia, and he was curious to know what the police suspected him. He approached 2 officers on the street and asked if there were any arrest warrants out for him, and wouldn't you know what there were? They arrested him. Well, 2 men, Roger Yost, 40, and William Eisberg, 40, were arrested in Fairbanks, Alaska. They tried to steal a 500-pound safe from a Moose Lodge Hall, overlooking the fact that they had arrived at the lodge on bicycles. And it's very difficult to balance a 500-pound safe on a bicycle. Needless to say, they did not get away with the crime. Well, they always say crime doesn't pay. This particular guy knew crime paid because he kept the books. He was born Meyer Sachaljansky in 1902 in Grodno, Russia. Changed his name to Meyer Lansky when he came to New York with his family as a child. He was known as a good Jewish boy until he teamed up with Bugsy Siegel to form the Jewish Bugs and Meyer mob. The small statue Lansky provided the planning and financial know-how, and Siegel and his friends provided the muscle. 1920, Prohibition was the law, so Lansky and Siegel joined forces with their old friend, Lucky Luciano, and they made a fortune selling liquor to speakeasies. 1931, Lansky helped Luciano rise to power and create La Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours. La Cosa Nostra grew so powerful that Lansky later described it as bigger than U.S. Steel. The mob was pulling in millions, and the bosses are coming to Lansky for financial advice. Some historians actually believe Lansky nicknamed the mob accountant actually ran the mafia through Luciano. What was going on, Lansky stayed under law enforcement's radar. After Prohibition ended, Lansky opened illegal gambling casinos in New York, New Orleans, and Florida. He was so profitable, and Lansky wanted to opened some offshore casinos in the 1950s. Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista welcomed him to Havana. That was before Castro came to power. Bugsy Siegel's hotel casino in Vegas lost so much money that the Commission had him killed in 1947. It's said that Lansky ordered the execution of his old friend. But Lansky stayed in power because he made crime pay. But even Lansky couldn't win forever. In 1959, he lost $7 million in mob money when Fidel Castro overthrew Batista and nationalized Cuba's casinos. In the 1970s, the feds went after him. At that point, he fled to Israel. 2 years later, Israel, tiring of him, deported him back to the U.S. On his return in 1973, he faced income tax evasion charges, but amazingly enough, he was acquitted. He never spent a day in jail, but the FBI claimed he had millions stashed away when he died of lung cancer in 1983. Forbes magazine believed it as well, listing him among their 700 wealthiest people in America in 1982. You know, a lot of things are counterfeited. But you know what the most counterfeited item in the world is? Louis Vuitton purses. In fact, the company itself estimates only 1% of Louis Vuitton purses on the market are actually authentic. So if you got one, you need to check. Well, it's not everybody who is a Meyer Lansky. We have what are known as mediocre masterminds out there as well. In 2001, Sean Myers drove his pickup truck into Lynn's Market in Wellsville, Pennsylvania. He drove it in backward, crashed through the window and tried to steal the ATM machine by dragging it with a chain attached to the truck. Well, unfortunately for Sean, it didn't work. A few days later, he went back and crashed his truck through the plywood that was covering the broken window and tried to steal the ATM again. And again he failed. Well, a few days later after that, he drove through the front window of nearby Rutter's farm store. And this time he actually did make off with the ATM. It was bouncing along behind his truck on a chain until it hit a parked car and broke free. Several months later, Myers returned to Lynn's Market, drove through Lynn's window again, chained up the ATM, and drove off. This time, the ATM stayed with him. He got away with it, and when he got home, broke into the machine, and wouldn't you know it, there was no money in it. Well, he got arrested and was ordered to pay thousands of dollars in restitution, sentenced to 6 years in prison. When asked why he went to so much effort to try to steal the ATMs, he said, well, he had to because he needed money for court costs from previous trials. Now that is what you know as a certified Looney Tune. Well, let's go to Benicia, California, where two other criminals did almost everything right. They had ski masks, semi-automatic handguns. They burst into the bank with everybody down on the floor. Went to get the money, and there was no money. It was a credit union that didn't use cash. Well, at that point, they decided luck wasn't with them, and they ran, and they didn't get caught, surprisingly enough. You know, sometimes a headline tells you all you need to know. For example, man who crashed through Slidell Airport gate arrested in underwear after alleged encounter with a snake. The headline itself is interesting, but it left out one important detail. Voodoo. The suspect was 43-year-old Kevin Bolton of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And the incident took place in October 2017 in Louisiana. According to all the reports, Bolton drove his Chevy into the small airport and crashed through one gate, then entered through another gate and crashed into a telephone pole, which fell on his truck. Well, not to be outdone, he jumped out of the truck and ran, was found 2 hours later lying in his underwear in the middle of a nearby road. Told officers he was in town to see a voodoo doctor, but at some point a snake climbed into his pants, and that caused the accident and also caused him to remove his pants. When asked about it, the police said, well, he may have been under the influence of a narcotic. We don't know. Well, sometimes You might say folks just can't help themselves. Bryce Edward Bennett Jr., 52, from York County, Pennsylvania, appealed a July 2013 conviction for shoplifting, claimed there was a lack of evidence in his original case. So, the appeals court judge took a look at all the evidence, and what he saw was interesting, to say the least. Number one, several supermarket employees saw Bennett with overloaded pockets run out of the store. Two, a police officer testified he saw hot dogs fly out of Bennett's pocket as he tried to run away. And three, when police caught Bennett, there was a pork chop and a shrimp reel stuffed inside his jacket. And while you may say this is all circumstantial, the conviction stood. Well, after a Frederick, Maryland tattoo shop was burglarized, the shop owner looked at the surveillance video and saw the burglars had covered their faces, but one of them forgot to cover up his arms. And one of those arms had a large tattoo that was recently inked on at the shop where he committed the crime. So, he was recognized, got arrested. 2014 in the Netherlands, a call was received from a crying drunk man who said he was trapped inside a building. He said he'd broken a window and tried to steal several items and couldn't find his way out. So the police came and freed him and then jailed him. Well, let's talk about the death of Vicki Morgan, model, longtime mistress of Alfred Bloomingdale, one of the wealthiest men in America. He was heir to the Bloomingdale department store fortune and a member of Ronald Reagan's kitchen cabinet. July 7th, 1983, she was found in her apartment beaten to death with a baseball bat. Her roommate, Marvin Pancoast, actually confessed to the crime. Well, Morgan was Bloomingdale's mistress for 12 years. And when Bloomingdale contracted terminal throat cancer and was hospitalized, his wife, Betsy, cut off Morgan's income. She was receiving between $10,000 and $18,000 a month from her paramour. Betsy put a stop to that. In response, Morgan decided to go public. She tried to publish her memoir, Alfred's Mistress, and when that fizzled, allegedly because of White House pressure, she filed a $10 million palimony suit against Bloomingdale, in which she revealed all of Bloomingdale's indiscretions. She described him as a drooling sadist with a fondness for bondage and beatings. Also accused him of loose talk about secret, delicate matters such as campaign contributions for Mr. Reagan. Well, as you might guess, with White House involvement, the case was thrown out, but the trial was an enormous embarrassment for the Bloomingdales and high-ranking Republican officials. Pancoast had a history of mental illness, previously confessed to crimes he hadn't committed, including the Tate LaBianca murders committed by the Manson family. Bloomingdale may have used Morgan to gather dirt on top-level Republican officials. Reportedly, Bloomingdale had his Hollywood house wired with state-of-the-art video cameras in every room and hidden behind false walls. And anybody who was important in a pre-administration, the administration of Ronald Reagan, who wanted divertisement, called on Alfred, regardless of what his or her fetish might be. And Bloomingdale allegedly got it all on tape. Well, surprisingly enough, after the murder, Morgan's apartment wasn't sealed by the L.A. police until more than 24 hours after the murder. According to Arthur and Louise Bardock, people could just walk in and walk out, and if there are any sex tapes in the condo, they certainly disappeared during that 24 hours. And the night before she was killed, according to her friend, Gordon Pasicius, Vicki confided to her that she was afraid of being murdered. Her friend had the feeling somebody with knowledge of the Bloomingdale tapes had approached her, possibly through Pancoast, with a proposal for blackmail. Now, all this having been said, there are certain possible conclusions you can draw from it. Number one, Pancoast killed her. I mean, he did confess and he got sentenced. Or number two, somebody in power had Morgan killed. And if videotapes did exist, They would have certainly been severely damaging to the Reagan administration. We'll probably never know. Well, what happens when you get falsely accused of something you didn't do? Well, in this first case, the accused was Francis Evelyn, 58, a custodian at Brooklands Public School 91 in New York City. He spent nearly 20 years on the job, well respected at work and in his neighborhood as well. When in 2007, police officers arrived at the PS 91, arrested Evelyn, cuffed him, took him away for questioning. Police commissioner announced that Evelyn was being accused of the heinous rape of an 8-year-old student on multiple occasions. They said that they had DNA evidence against him. And then the police took the unorthodox step of locking him up in Rikers Island prison with actual murderers and rapists. Well, 3 days later, police finally got around to interviewing the accuser. Turned out she was known as a troubled child who had lied about being abused on previous occasions. And worse still, the police described her attacker as a bald white man, but the police arrested Evelyn, who was black. Well, as you might guess, charges were dropped, but the story had already gained worldwide attention. On the bus home, Evelyn said a woman was reading the paper with his picture on the cover. Headline accused him of being a rapist. He said he couldn't walk down the street without people pointing at him or insulting him. Well, he sued the city of New York City for $10 million. Sometimes people get ahead of themselves, as in this case. In another case, defense lawyer Philip Robertson tried to make a dramatic point in front of the jury with his client's recent robbery trial in Dallas. Pointed a pistol used in the crime at the jury box, causing 2 jurors to fling their arms in front of their faces and others to gasp. Though Robertson was arguing that his client should be sentenced only to probation, after this little display, the horrified jury gave him 13 years. Sometimes intentions are misunderstood. And then let's talk about what you might refer to as the elephant in the room. The plaintiff was a Polish hunter named Waldemar. The defendant was Orlowski Jagdriesen, a German travel agency that specializes in African hunting expeditions. You see, Waldemar really wanted to shoot an elephant. So in 2010, he booked a vacation that sent him to a game preserve in Zimbabwe. That's one of the few countries in the world where it's still legal to hunt elephants. Waldemar was told if he found an elephant's excrement, he could pick up the animal's trail and then shoot it. But he found neither excrement nor elephants and came home empty-handed. After he complained, the agency gave him a free trip back to Zimbabwe, and this time he shot and killed an elephant. Well, you'd think he'd be happy at this point, but instead he sued the travel agency for $130,000 for failing to provide him with an elephant to kill on the first trip. Well, quite often, lunatic judges find violations where there are none, but in this case, the case was dismissed. The judge remarked, the fact the elephant wasn't encountered during the hunt doesn't testify that elephants weren't there. Maybe you just didn't find it. Now that is something utterly refreshing. A judge with common sense. I've not come in contact with but one. Well, after a neighbor's dog pooped on his lawn, Walter Travis, 68, shot the neighbor several times. Now, she did not shoot the dog. Had he shot the dog, it would have probably been written off as justice. Shooting the dog got him the owner got him a trial. Well, Daddy Jim stole the garbage truck at gunpoint And why did he take such actions? Because the truck's driver kept using his driveway to turn around. So he just stole the garbage truck. Then Kevin French, 45, shot his neighbor in the head with an air rifle because he mowed his lawn too often. Well, the neighbor recovered. Doesn't say what happened to Kevin French and his air rifle, though. There's a Chinese term called ding zui. And the term means to hire somebody to stand trial and serve time on someone else's behalf. The term actually translates to substitute criminal. And it's a way to make a little side income. Well, everyone's heard the expression crime pays. Well, that's not always the case. We got a crime took place in Savannah, Georgia. Now, justice in Georgia is a very bizarre concept. In this particular case, a man wanted to steal guns from the back of a squad car parked at a police station. So he climbed in. Well, once he got inside the car, he realized he had screwed up. The back doors of police cars lock automatically when somebody gets inside. Eventually, the police showed up and arrested him. Then we got a crime that took place in Charles City, Virginia. After being cornered by police, a drug dealer carrying 12 bags of cocaine ran into a forest to escape. The trees grew thickly, and he was certain the police would lose him. But he overlooked the fact he was wearing those sneakers that light up every time you take a step. So the police just followed the blinking lights into the forest. He never thought about taking off his shoes. Then we've got an individual who walked into a convenience store in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. He was stopped by a man asking for a favor. The man informed the passerby that he planned to rob the store but needed a disguise. Gave the person $1 to go inside and buy him a scarf he could use to cover his face. So the bystander, being a logical individual, took the $1, went inside, bought the scarf, and called the police. Wound up with a free scarf. Well, sometimes very strange crimes are reported. In this particular case, we're talking about a pair of twins, Bernick Lee and Breon Alston Curry. They're 19 years old. In May of 2002, both brothers are being held at the Durham County Jail in North Carolina. Bernick Lee was awaiting trial for murder, and Breon was being held on an unrelated robbery charge. On the day Breon was scheduled for release, the jail's computer crashed, and the guards, working from a handwritten list of inmates to be released, went to Bernick Lee's cell and asked him if it was Breon, and Bernick said yes. And his face did match the photo on the release form, because they were twins, remember? And they gave the right home address. Well, Bernick spent about 7 hours on the outside and then turned himself back in. Later pled guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 9 to 12 years in prison. Now, county officials, of course, never figured out whether Breon had any part in this little snafu. Jail's director, Lieutenant Colonel George Naylor, said, "I don't have any information to believe that, but I don't have any information not to believe it either." We got another set of twins, Carrie and David Moore, who were 27. They were both serving time in a Nebraska State Penitentiary in October 1984. One afternoon, they met up in a conference room, switched clothes when nobody was looking at them. Afterward, Carrie, posing as David, was released into the prison yard, and David, posing as Carrie, was escorted back to Carrie's cell. Well, the ruse was exposed when Carrie reported for David's kitchen duty. The kitchen supervisor realized that David wasn't David and reported the incident to the guards. Well, when confronted, the twins confessed. Unlikely they could have kept it up much longer. David was serving 4 to 6 years for burglary, and Carrie was waiting execution on death row. I think at the end, David, when facing the executioner, would have said, "Wait a minute, I'm not David. I'm not Carrie." Then we got Tony and Terry Litton, 19. Tony was serving a 2-year sentence for burglary when Terry came to visit him in March of 1990. Somehow, the brothers managed to strip to their underwear and switch clothes in the middle of a bustling guarded visitor's room. When the visit was up, Terry went back to Tony's cell, and Tony walked out the prison with the rest of the visitors. Well, they made one slip up, and it's a word of advice to identical twins. If you're planning to trade places, don't have your names tattooed on the backs of your neck. These two did. When an inmate noticed that Tony's now read Terry, he called a guard. Well, Tony was caught 3 days later and returned to jail to serve out his full sentence. He didn't get any parole this time, plus extra time for escape. Terry served some time of his own for being involved in the escape. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll talk more about stupid criminals and crazy crimes in our next show. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening. And if you want to enjoy some of the best cheesecake you've ever eaten, go to Just Cheesecake Outlet, 404 Arizona here in El Paso, and you will be glad that you did. See you tomorrow.